Hey again, this is Manny, one of the producers of the channel. I just want to let you know that the episodes are now podcasts too. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Audible, Pandora, and pretty much anywhere you listen. Same cozy stories, just easier to take on the go and with no ads. Just look us up by the same name, Deep Sleep Stories, and search for our logo. I'm also adding the links in the description below. Thank you so much for the support.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. In this gentle place, you are invited to leave your cares behind and settle into the soft cradle of relaxation. Take a moment now to feel the gentle weight of your body as it rests against whatever surface supports you. Notice the rhythm of your breath, a soothing tide that flows in and out with quiet purpose. Let your shoulders drift downward, releasing any tension that may have gathered there. Take a deep, unhurried inhale and let it melt into a long, comforting exhale. In this space, you can surrender to stillness and calm. Tonight, you will hear a story set on a rainy evening in a hidden dwarf's cottage, a peaceful tale inspired by the comforting presence of Snow White. The hush of raindrops and the glow of lantern light will guide you into a warm, cozy atmosphere where the rustle of leaves and the crackling of a fire will lull you ever closer to rest. Breathe in that soothing imagery. Breathe out all else and allow yourself to drift deeper into the soft hush of this story. Now, let us begin. On a quiet edge of an ancient forest, there stood a quaint little cottage cloaked by tall fir trees and sheltering oaks. A winding stone path led to a heavy wooden door that was small but sturdy, flanked by glowing lanterns placed in carved brackets. Tonight, the world outside was silvered by moonlight dancing through a gentle sheet of rain. Each drop tapped softly on the roof's wooden shingles, contributing its delicate rhythm to the hushed song of evening. It was a calm and peaceful hour. No howling winds or rolling thunder to be found, just a soft cascade of raindrops that sparkled in the occasional glow of a hidden moon. Inside the cottage, 7 dwarfs moved about in unhurried steps. Their voices, if one could call them voices at all in such a quiet hush, were little more than gentle murmurs. They had spent the day tending to their humble tasks within the forest, a forest known for its emerald canopy and soft moss-lined trails. But once dusk fell, the dwarfs retired to their cozy haven, a home they had built with care over many years. Now, with the rainfall providing a gentle lullaby, they gathered around a warmly lit fireplace, each finding comfort in the presence of the others. In one corner stood a robust wooden table, worn smooth by time. Atop it sat a simple arrangement of wildflowers in a ceramic vase, muted by the dim glow of lanterns that hung from beams above. The flicker from the hearth painted the walls with dancing shadows, while thick curtains at the windows shut out the chill. It was an inviting space that seemed to welcome weary souls who might find themselves at the doorstep in need of rest. The dwarfs each had their own routines for an evening such as this, yet their rhythms gently wove together in a tapestry of companionship. One dwarf, wearing a soft, crimson cap that dipped low near his ears, sat in a rocking chair by the fire. He gazed into the flames, entranced by the swirl and flicker of warmth, the reflection dancing across his round cheeks. Another dwarf stood quietly near the window, looking out at the night, entranced by the subtle glisten of raindrops on the glass. A third dwarf had busied himself with a small pot of tea, carefully adding fragrant leaves, waiting for the water to reach just the right temperature before pouring a soothing brew into small earthenware cups. Meanwhile, perched on a stool near the hearth was Snow White. She had found refuge with the dwarf some time ago, and they had taken comfort in her presence as she'd taken comfort in theirs. Her voice was soft, though seldom heard tonight, as she too was lulled by the subtle cadence of rain. She nestled into a snug corner of the room, draped in a simple shawl, its edges embroidered with tiny white flowers that seemed to reflect her gentle nature. A few dwarfs cast her tender smiles, their eyes reflecting fondness and gratitude that she was there, safe and at ease. The interior of the cottage exuded a warm, lived-in charm. The wooden beams overhead displayed the slightest hint of wood smoke, a fragrance that was comforting, reminiscent of countless peaceful nights spent gathered by the fireplace. Small but neatly fashioned shelves lined the walls, bearing polished stones, curious trinkets from the forest, and a handful of worn, well-loved books. Each dwarf had contributed in some way to this collection, offering tokens of memory or little wonders from their travels. The windows were small but quaintly shaped, and tiny diamond-shaped panes framed the silver grey of the rainy evening. The cottage itself was almost reminiscent of a living thing. The wooden beams had settled into a shape that breathed ease, and the furniture seemed perfectly placed, as though each piece knew precisely where it belonged. Whenever the dwarfs returned from the forest, they felt the same wave of contentment wash over them as they slipped inside, safe from the elements. On a windowsill stood an unlit lantern, whose glass walls were etched with spirals and foliage that seemed to capture, in stillness, the swirling patterns of wind-blown leaves. Its handle was curved, wrought from a bit of polished metal. Tonight it remained unlit because the dwarves were satisfied with the dappled warmth that already filled the space. The glow of the fireplace and the other lanterns was enough, creating gentle pockets of light amidst pockets of shadow. In that soft interplay, the dwarfs occasionally glanced around, half smiling at the comforting hush that enveloped the cottage. The tea finished steeping. Steam curled delicately from the pot, carrying a subtle herbal scent that seemed to unite with the earthy fragrance of the wooden walls, the faint aroma of the crackling fire, and the damp, mossy perfume drifting in from outside. One dwarf carefully poured the tea into cups for each of his companions, and they accepted these small vessels of warmth with mild nods of thanks. Snow White, too, cradled her teacup gently, her eyes reflecting the flicker of the fire as she took in the moment's quiet beauty. In the lull between sips and soft conversation, the hush of rainfall grew more distinct. There was a slow, even pitter-patter that suggested the clouds overhead were content to let their gentle tears fall without urgency. The dwarves found something soothing in this natural lullaby, for rain in the forest carried with it a promise of renewal and life. They had grown accustomed to the forest's cycles, and though they adored sunlit mornings and vibrant afternoons of bird song, there was a unique comfort in nights like this. The air saturated with the scent of wet pine needles and damp earth, each drop echoing around the snug interior. The dwarfs each had a snug bed carved from sturdy wood, lined up in a row along the far side of the cottage. The beds were neatly made, each draped with a cozy quilt tailored to the dwarf who slept there. The patchwork patterns were subtle in color, but rich in meaning, each stitched square symbolizing a memory or story from the forest. Evening was well underway, and though the dwarfs were unhurried, they knew that soon they would sink into those inviting beds. But there was no rush. Sometimes, simply sitting near the fire with the hush of rain for company was reward enough after a day of steady chores. Inside this comforting haven, the dwarfs could reflect on the forest they called home. By daylight, they worked together to gather berries, mushrooms, or precious stones from the nearby caverns. Sometimes they fished for trout in the winding streams or collected wild herbs that grew in the shade of old oak groves. Yet all these tasks were more than mere labor. They were shared moments of fellowship in nature. Each dwarf found joy in noticing the small wonders of the forest, the way the sunlight filtered through leaves, the quiet scurry of woodland creatures, and the hush that fell over the forest floor during moments of stillness. Snow White, too, shared in these wonders, often humming soft tunes while helping gather what was needed, her gentle voice mingling with the forest's own lullabies. Tonight, though, was a night for rest and reverie, a night to close off the outside world and nurture the gentle spirit within. Beyond the thick cottage walls, the rainfall continued, weaving a tapestry of sound that seemed to harmonize perfectly with the crackle of the fire. Every so often, a puff of wind rustled the treetops, sending droplets trickling from branch to branch, a soft percussion that invited deeper rest. The forest, known for its quiet enchantment, seemed almost alive with the lullaby of raindrops, as though each tree and rock and mossy bank breathed along with the dwarfs, content to let the night pass peacefully. In such a setting, it was common for the dwarfs to reflect on their days of labor and their simple joys. The one in the rocking chair, who was known for his calm nature, let his eyelids grow heavy, lulled by the warm cradle of the flickering flames and the rhythmic squeak of his chair against the floor. Another, the one who stood near the window, quietly relayed in gentle murmurs what he observed outside. How the raindrops traced silver lines down the window pane. How the clouds drifted gracefully across the sky. His voice was more a whisper than a conversation, and the others occasionally nodded, content in the knowledge that all was well with the night. Snow White, too, found solace in this hush. She leaned her head back against a cushion, letting her shawl drape softly over her arms, allowing her thoughts to wander gently through memories. She remembered how she first stumbled upon the dwarf's hidden cottage, seeking shelter in a time of uncertainty. How welcoming they had been, offering kindness and a place to rest. Tonight, With the sound of rain and the tranquil crackle of wood, the memory felt like a distant echo, replaced by comfort and gratitude. Her eyes drifted from the embers in the fireplace to the silhouettes of her dear companions, each quietly absorbed in their own reflection. Time flowed gently here, with no pressing demands to mark the hours. The dwarfs, in their tranquil rhythms, encouraged this sense of timelessness. One by one, they finished their tea, placing their empty cups on the wooden table. The soft clink of earthenware was a soothing contrast to the hush of the cottage. Almost in unison, they all seemed to take a deep breath, exhaling in gentle acceptance of the present moment. With a nod to each other, they began their modest preparations for bedtime. Simple chores needed to be done first, ensuring the fire would burn safely overnight, tidying any stray cups or spoons left about, and latching the windows so the soft breeze wouldn't bring in too much moisture from the rain. One dwarf carefully placed a fresh log on the fire, ensuring just enough heat would remain without overwhelming the cozy space. Another dwarf extinguished a lantern that hung near the door. The others quietly gathered their tools, sliding them onto a small bench near the hearth, ensuring the cottage was free of clutter. Snow White rose from her seat, smoothing out the folds of her dress, and helped gather any scattered items. A small cushion here, a bit of stray thread there. As she moved, the skirt of her dress swayed gently, catching the firelight with a subtle shimmer. She wore a pair of simple slippers, which whispered across the wooden floor with each step, adding a delicate counterpoint to the pitter-patter of the rain. None of them hurried, none of them spoke loudly. All around was the sense of a community settling in for a night of serene, well-deserved rest. The dwarfs did not require elaborate evening routines. They lived simply, cherishing the forest's offerings by day and revering the hush of twilight by night. Yet, they also had small rituals that brought them comfort. For instance, a particular dwarf in a faded green cap liked to check every corner of the cottage to make sure the shutters were fastened and that the coals of the fire would be contained. Another dwarf enjoyed lighting a single small candle on the mantel, a gentle beacon in the darkness, even though the fire still glowed strong. These rituals, repeated each night, lent a sense of continuity, as though the cottage itself murmured, "You are safe here. The night may come, but morning will follow, as it always does." When the tasks were done, each dwarf found his bed. Nestled in the far corner was the dwarf who had already grown sleepy by the fire, and he climbed under a quilt, patterned with little diamonds of blue and green. Another dwarf, who had been gazing out the window, settled into a bed with a quilt embroidered with a tree motif, the leaves swirling and dancing as though they had been painted by a gentle breeze. They tucked themselves in, each letting out a low hum of contentment as their bodies sank into the softness of their beds. Snow White had her own little sleeping nook. A small bed had been arranged for her, lined with fresh linens and a soft pillow. She slipped beneath the covers with a faint smile, grateful for a place so welcoming. Silence enveloped the cottage. The few lanterns left burning cast a soft, amber glow across the wooden walls, while the fireplace crackled its last gentle bursts of flame. The dwarfs closed their eyes, hearts filled with the gentle hum of the rain, the glow of the fire, and the closeness of their family of friends. Outside, the forest breathed in unison. Trees swayed slowly, rustling in time with the drops that fell from leaf to leaf, trunk to root, soaking into the dark earth. Occasionally, a distant bird offered a soft chirp, muffled by the hush of the damp night. All was at peace. Though eyelids grew heavy, the dwarves had one more comfort to share. A soft voice drifted from one of the beds. It was a dwarf known for his kind lullabies, quiet tunes that often lulled them all into slumber. His voice, low and soothing, merged seamlessly with the hush of rain. He did not sing words exactly, but a gentle melody that spoke of restful trees, of night skies sprinkled with starlight, of the bright promise of morning. It was not a tune meant to stir excitement or spark memory. Rather, it was more like a sweet hum that resonated with the beating of tired hearts, whispering that all was well. Snow White's gaze lingered on the dancing embers in the fireplace as that lullaby drifted around her. The dwarf's breathing began to slow, chests rising and falling in gentle unison. One dwarf let out a contented sigh, another a soft snore. The hush of the rain provided a perfect harmony, tapping lightly against window panes, dripping from the eaves. And with each cycle of breath, each note of lullaby, the tension from the day dissolved into the stillness, replaced by a deep sense of belonging and ease. The forest, too, seemed to settle further. The underbrush, glistening in the rain, stood quiet except for the occasional whisper of a nocturnal creature shifting in its burrow. The lofty trees that framed the cottage seemed to stand as silent guardians, content to let the dwarfs sleep in peace. Their leaves, heavy with raindrops, shimmered when struck by faint moonlight that peeked through the gaps in the clouds. When a breeze stirred, droplets cascaded in tiny waterfalls, forming shimmering curtains that glided through the air before disappearing into the soft ground below. As slumber gently found each dwarf, Snow White allowed her eyes to close. She, too, was lulled by this orchestra of quiet. Her final waking thought was one of tender appreciation for the cottage, for the dwarfs, and for the peaceful night that enveloped them all. She sensed the reassurance that the forest would watch over them, that dawn would come gently, and that life would continue its comforting cycle of work and rest, companionship and reflection. Through the night, the fire in the hearth grew quiet, leaving glowing coals that pulsed like tiny red eyes. The shadows along the walls stilled, their once dancing shapes now hushed as the flames receded. The dwarfs stirred only in the softest of ways, perhaps turning onto another side, or pulling their quilts more snugly around their shoulders. Rain eventually lessened, its once steady rhythm fading to a soft drizzle that tapered into silence. Perhaps the clouds had emptied themselves enough for the night, gifting the forest and the cottage with precious drops to quench the ground's thirst. The hush that followed was equally soothing, like a lull in a lullaby that helps one drift further into rest. Morning would come gently, with the first rays of light slipping through the thick canopy outside, shining upon dewy leaves and glimmering in small puddles. But that moment lay hours away. For now, the night reigned, calm and deep, wrapping its arms around each sleeping soul. If one were to step outside, though in that rain few would, one might witness a scene of pure enchantment. Soft starlight reflecting on puddles, ferns nodding in the breeze, a gentle mist drifting between tree trunks. No footprints disturbed the wet earth around the dwarf's cottage. It seemed as though the whole forest paused to let them rest. Within the cottage, the hush spread from corner to corner, from floorboards to rafters. The dwarfs were known for their closeness to nature, their hearty courage, and their genuine kindness. But in this hour, what defined them most was their restful peace. A sense of unity pulsed through the stillness. as if their dreams might be knitted from the same gentle thread, weaving a fabric of serene images and calm recollections. Perhaps they dreamed of cloud-wreathed mountain peaks or quiet streams under shady willows. Perhaps some drifted through recollections of blossoming meadows or the gentle arcs of sunbeams across the cottage floor in midday. Perhaps they dreamed of finding a hidden clearing glowing with fireflies on a warm summer evening. Whatever visions filled their minds, the night cradled them all in a single, tender hush. As the midnight hours slipped by, the occasional rustle of movement would greet the silence, someone shifting a pillow or letting out a drowsy sigh. Yet, these were moments so faint, they only underscored the prevailing calm. The hush was the real keeper of the night. Beneath the dwarfs' beds, the wooden floor remained still and well-worn, bearing the marks of many seasons of footsteps. The quilts that warmed each dwarf had been stitched with patient hands, reflecting all the devotion and care that had gone into making the cottage a true haven. All too often in the wide world beyond this hidden realm, nights can feel rushed, swallowed by worries of tomorrow or lingering reflections on the day just past. But here, in the dwarves' secret forest dwelling, time stretched like a slow river, gently carrying anxious thoughts away. There was no clock ticking ominously, no brash light shining through the shutters. Nighttime was a time of pure rest, of letting go. And so, the dwarfs rested on, comforted by the presence of one another, comforted by the peaceful night and all its nurturing quiet. Indeed, the dwarves and Snow White had discovered a kind of harmony that might be rare elsewhere. Their days, though filled with honest work, were underpinned by cooperation and a genuine enjoyment of each other's company. Their nights, like this one, were guided by a reverence for the forest's rhythms, for the hush that allowed them to recover from the day and find renewed spirit for the next morning. Each dwarf had his own personality, his own manner of speech and preference for tasks, but these differences gently complemented each other, woven together by mutual respect and friendship. If any dream had shape or color, it would be the soft hues of a moonlit glade. In that dream glade, the dwarfs might see gentle animals approaching without fear. Maybe the birds would sing a lullaby of their own from the safety of leafy boughs. A sparkling brook might flow nearby, capturing the reflections of stars. Overhead, a sky so wide and calm that each dwarf felt small, yet cherished within its expanse. This was the essence of the forest they knew and loved, and it found its way into their sleeping minds. Gradually, the late night edged closer to dawn. The hush around the cottage thickened, as though the darkest hours of the night had settled in to cradle the dwarfs in their final hours of slumber. The few glowing embers in the hearth finally released their last bits of warmth. A subtle chill crept in, but not enough to disturb the quilt's warmth. Perhaps if one dwarf stirred, he might notice a faint draft against his cheek, but with a soft, sleepy motion, he'd pull his blanket higher, nestle deeper into the pillow, and drift seamlessly back into rest. Yet beyond the walls, the forest continued its gentle watch. Raindrops that had pooled in leaves gradually slipped off into the soil. A slight breeze carried the scent of pine and damp earth through the clearing around the cottage, swirling it against the walls as though leaving a gift for the morning. The faintest hint of starlight glimmered above the clouds, and somewhere in the distance, an owl cooed softly before returning to its quiet roost. Everything breathed contentment. Everything spoke in murmurs of hush and gentleness. In this delicate space between night and dawn, Snow White's eyelids fluttered. She did not wake fully, but a comforting sense of security brushed against her heart. She felt a gentle warmth flow through her, as if remembering the kindness she had found here among the dwarfs. Even in dreams, she perceived a sense of safety and belonging that beckoned her deeper into restful slumber. She relaxed further into the bed, letting out a soft breath that mingled with the hush. Just before returning to a dreamlike state, she sensed the quiet presence of her friends around her, each slumbering in turn, each cradled by the hush of the forest. Yes, she thought, let us stay in this peaceful realm. Though morning was inevitable, it was not here yet. The night wished to hold them a little longer, to ensure every tired muscle could truly relax, every tangled thought could unravel in the softness of darkness. There was a benevolence in the night, a kindly understanding that rest is a gift to be savored, that a weary soul can be renewed by the simple grace of sleep. In that cosmic hush, time did not rush forward. Instead, it moved like a slow, healing current, calm as a gentle stream, and the dwarfs and Snow White drifted with it, content and safe. Eventually, almost imperceptibly, a shift occurred in the air outside. The sky, while still heavily veiled by clouds, slowly began to lighten from inky black toward a muted grey. The forest creatures who rose before dawn might have stirred, rustling in the undergrowth, testing the damp earth for fresh leaves or seeds. The first notes of a bird song, though faint and hesitant, might soon float through the clearing. But inside the dwarfs' hidden cottage, the hush still reigned. The dwarfs and their guest did not need to stir until they were ready. This was a place of deep ease, where morning could come gradually, gently, bringing no sudden clamor. If a traveler had stumbled upon the cottage in that pale pre-dawn, they would likely have paused in awe. The structure itself blended seamlessly with the forest, a natural extension of the trees and stone around it. The soft lines of the roof, the curling smoke that had once drifted from the chimney, even the warm lamplight that had glowed through the windows, now all were peacefully subdued, marking a place devoted to rest. Perhaps the faint glow of the coals in the hearth might still be visible through a crack in the curtains, but only just. The hush was almost tangible, a comforting presence. Inside, each dwarf slept on, untroubled by the slow dance of the hours. Even the dwarf who typically rose first, eager to greet the morning, seemed suspended in this calm, lulled into deeper rest by the soft hush of the night. The quilts that covered them were layered with patterns reminiscent of their shared history, forest motifs, mountain vistas, the swirl of swirling leaves. Those patterns in the dim light spoke silently of memory and kinship. Another dwarf might have dreamed of a simpler time, of a meadow behind the cottage where daisies and buttercups burst forth in spring. Those recollections twined in the hush, weaving a tapestry of dreams that soothed the mind as morning's approach remained gentle. Snow White, too, rested in unwavering calm. She might have perceived the faint sense that dawn was coming, but she did not rouse. In her half-dream, she heard the lullaby of the dwarfs hum, still echoing in her memory, the hush of rain blending with her own steady heartbeat. She felt safe, enveloped in a profound sense of quiet joy. There was no hurry, no pressing call to action. Here, in the dwarf's hidden cottage, she could grant herself the freedom to simply be, to let her spirit float through that borderland between slumber and waking. The forest gave them this gift, time unbroken by the demands of modern life, time to reconnect with their own rhythms. And so, the hush lingered, a gentle sentinel guarding them from any stir of worry or unrest. The hush recognized that in this small cottage lived hearts that appreciated the subtle wonders of the world, hearts that gave back to the forest with each gentle act of kindness. This hush was their reward, a cocoon in which to transform weariness into renewed energy for the day that would soon dawn. It is in these last stretches of the night, when darkness begins to lift, that the promise of a new day feels most tender. The dwarfs were accustomed to such transitions, but they never took them for granted. Each morning was a quiet revelation, a renewal of all that was good and hopeful. In a short while, perhaps, one dwarf's eyelids would flutter open, and he would see the subtle beams of morning filtering through the windows. He might sit up, rubbing sleep from his eyes, taking a slow breath that tasted of fresh forest air, exhaling with a sleepy smile. Yet, for now, that moment still lay in the future, and the hush was undisturbed. At length, the hush began to change character, so subtly it would be difficult to notice. Where before it was steeped in the gentle song of falling rain, it now evolved into a lightly shimmering silence, woven with the first flickers of dawn. Raindrops no longer drummed upon the roof. They now adorned the leaves and grass outside as tiny beads of moisture that refracted the earliest glow. In this hush, the dwarfs remained sheltered and content, their breathing slow, their dreams deep. As the edges of the sky lightened, the hush offered its farewell. One by one, the dwarfs shifted under their quilts, and small, sleepy murmurs floated through the room. It was time, very soon, to begin a new day. Yet even in this gentle shift, no sense of hurry intruded. The hush, though slowly giving way to dawn, left behind an atmosphere of warmth and comfort. Whether they woke now or lingered in bed a few moments longer, they carried within them the calm that had rested over the cottage all night. There was no abrupt jolt from dream to waking, only a smooth, gradual transition, like drifting along a soft current that pulls the dreamer toward the shore. Indeed, the dwarfs would rise, share a quiet morning greeting, and light a small fire if the morning air was still chilly. Snow White would stretch beneath her covers, then slip out of bed, her bare feet whispering on the floor as she made her way toward the table, perhaps to brew another pot of tea. But that was all yet to come. For these final moments, as the hush reached its gentle conclusion, it allowed each dwarf to float in that blissful space between dreaming and waking, a place where the heart can rest and the mind can dwell in peaceful innocence. Somewhere in that gentle transition, the hush reminded them of the comforts that had ushered them into slumber. The steady patter of rain, the crackle of the fire, the quiet hum of a lullaby. Those memories would linger through the day, providing a cushion of calm even when tasks needed to be done. And so, the dwarfs would step into the day with fresh eyes, grateful hearts, and a sense that the world was good and welcoming. The hush had done its work. Now, as the story drifts to its close, the lingering feeling of the dwarf's hidden cottage envelops you like a gentle cloud. The rain has calmed, the forest hush remains, and each dwarf lies in peaceful slumber. Let these images settle into your own quiet mind. Let your breath remain steady, slow, and deep. Let any cares that once lingered slip away like raindrops rolling off a leaf. With each exhale, feel a gentle release, as though the quiet energy of the cottage's hush is now within you, soothing and comforting. The memory of the dwarf's cozy home, with its flickering lanterns and sturdy wooden beams, can remain in your thoughts as you float toward your own restful sleep. Let your muscles ease, let your eyelids grow heavier. There is no rush. There is only the promise of a soft night's rest, wrapped in the warmth of that quiet hearth, the lingering hum of lullabies, and the gentle patter of the evening rain. Allow yourself to slip into a deep, comforting sleep, much like the dwarfs who have drifted off in their cottage beds. Know that you can revisit this tranquil place whenever you wish, letting its soft hush guide you to stillness. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.